The gym's air was thick with the scent of sweat and metal, but all I could feel was the heat of Ethan's hand grazing my wrist. My heart slammed against my ribs. A traitor to the calm I was desperately trying to fake. I come here to lift weights, not to unravel under the weight of a single touch from my straight best friend. Kevin stood under the harsh fluorescent lights of Apex Fitness, a boutique gym in downtown Seattle, trying to focus on the barbell in front of him. At 25, he was no stranger to the grind. His lean frame was proof of years spent sculpting himself, not just for looks, but for the discipline it brought to his chaotic life. Growing up in a small, conservative town in Oregon, he'd learned early to hide parts of himself, especially the part that ached for men like Ethan. Seattle was supposed to be his fresh start, a city where he could be unapologetically himself. But Ethan made that impossible. Ethan was everything Kevin wasn't: effortlessly confident, charmingly oblivious, and, most crucially, straight. Or so Kevin had always assumed. They'd met 2 years ago at a tech startup where Kevin designed apps and Ethan handled marketing. Their friendship had been instant, built on late-night coding sessions, shared beers, and Ethan's relentless teasing about Kevin's hipster coffee obsession. But lately, something had shifted. Ethan's jokes lingered too long. His glances held too much weight. And now, here in the gym, his hands are finding excuses to touch Kevin in ways that felt anything but platonic. "Yo, Kev, you're slacking on form again," Ethan said, stepping closer, his voice low and teasing. He was 26, with a build that screamed former high school quarterback, broad shoulders, blonde hair clipped short, and brown eyes that seemed to see right through Kevin's defenses. He wore a white t-shirt that clung to his chest, damp with sweat, and gray sweatpants that did little to hide his athletic frame. "Let me spot you." Kevin's throat tightened as Ethan's hands found his shoulders, guiding him into position under the barbell. The touch was firm, professional even, but then Ethan's fingers lingered, sliding down Kevin's arms to adjust his grip. It was a spark, a jolt that shot through Kevin's veins, setting every nerve alight. He tried to focus on the weight, on the cold steel in his hands, but all he could feel was Ethan standing too close, his breath warm against Kevin's neck. "You good, man?" Ethan asked, his voice softened now, almost intimate. Kevin nodded, not trusting his voice. He pushed the barbell up, muscles straining, but his mind was elsewhere, tangled in the question he'd been dodging for months. What the hell is happening between us? The gym was quiet tonight, just a handful of regulars scattered across the treadmills and weight racks. Seattle's skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Space Needle a distant silhouette against the fading sunset. Kevin had always loved this time of day, the way the city seemed to hold its breath before night took over. But tonight, the only thing holding its breath was him. Ethan stepped back, giving Kevin space to rack the barbell, but his eyes didn't leave Kevin's face. "You're getting stronger," he said, a grin tugging at his lips. "But you still need me to keep you in check." Kevin laughed, hoping it sounded casual. "Yeah, sure, Mr. Personal Trainer. You just like bossing me around." "Maybe I do," Ethan shot back, his tone playful but laced with something heavier, something that made Kevin's pulse race. He turned away, grabbing a towel to wipe his face, desperate to hide the flush creeping up his neck. This wasn't supposed to happen. Ethan was his friend, his straight friend, the guy who dated half the women in their office and never once hinted at anything else. But these touches, these looks, they were rewriting the rules Kevin had spent years memorizing. The truth was, Kevin had been in love with Ethan for over a year. It had started small, a flicker of attraction he could ignore, but it had grown into something he couldn't control. Every smile, every laugh, every casual brush of Ethan's hand felt like a promise Kevin knew better than to believe. He'd seen what happened when you let yourself hope. His high school crush, a football player named Jake, had laughed in his face when Kevin confessed. The memory still stung, a reminder to keep his heart locked tight. But Ethan wasn't Jake. He was kind, thoughtful, the kind of guy who dropped everything to help a friend. And lately, he'd been finding excuses to be near Kevin, inviting him to the gym, grabbing coffee after work, even crashing at Kevin's apartment when they stayed up too late playing video games. It was confusing, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. "Want to hit the showers?" Ethan asked, slinging his towel over his shoulder. His eyes locked on Kevin's, and for a moment, the gym seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Kevin swallowed hard. "Yeah, sure." He followed Ethan toward the locker room, his mind racing. This was just a shower, just two friends cleaning up after a workout. But as Ethan's hand brushed his lower back, guiding him through the door, Kevin felt that spark again, a fire he wasn't sure he could extinguish. The locker room smelled of cedar and chlorine, a sharp contrast to the electric tension humming between Kevin and Ethan. Kevin kept his eyes on the tiled floor, willing his heart to slow down. But Ethan's presence was a magnet, pulling his gaze upward. He caught Ethan peeling off his shirt, revealing a chest sculpted from years of discipline. And Kevin's breath hitched, betraying him. "Dude, you're staring," Ethan said, his voice light but his eyes sharp, like he knew exactly what he was doing. He tossed his shirt into his locker and turned, giving Kevin a full view of his toned torso. "What's up with you tonight? You're all quiet." Kevin forced a laugh, grabbing his own towel to avoid Ethan's gaze. "Just tired. Man. Long day." It was a lie, and they both knew it. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks, and Kevin wasn't sure if he wanted to run from it or dive in. They stepped into the showers, the sound of water hitting tiles drowning out the silence between them. Kevin chose a stall at the far end, hoping distance would cool the heat in his chest. But Ethan, infuriatingly, picked the one right next to him. The glass partitions offered little privacy, and Kevin caught glimpses of Ethan's silhouette through the steam, broad shoulders, the curve of his back, the way water traced paths over his skin. He squeezed his eyes shut, focusing on the cold tile under his feet, but his mind was a traitor, painting pictures he couldn't unsee. "Yo, Kev," Ethan called over the sound of the water. "You ever think about, I don't know, taking risks? Like going for something you're not sure about?" Kevin's heart stuttered. He turned off the shower, wrapping a towel around his waist before stepping out. "What kind of risks?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Ethan emerged from his stall, a towel slung low on his hips, droplets of water clinging to his skin. He leaned against the sink, his eyes searching Kevin's face, like something that could change everything. A job, a place, a person. The word hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Kevin's mouth went dry. He wanted to ask, to demand what Ethan meant, but fear clamped his lips shut. Instead, he muttered, "Yeah, I guess. Depends on the stakes." Ethan's lips quirked. Not quite a smile. High stakes, high reward. Right. He stepped closer. Close enough that Kevin could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. You just gotta know when to make your move. Kevin's pulse was a drumbeat in his ears. He wanted to believe Ethan was talking about them. About this. But doubt was a familiar shadow. He'd misread signals before, and the fallout had nearly broken him. So he nodded, muttered something about getting dressed, and fled to his locker, his heart a tangled mess of hope and dread. Back at his apartment that night, Kevin couldn't shake the memory of Ethan's words, his touches, his eyes. He paced his small living room, the Seattle skyline a blur outside his window. His phone buzzed, and Ethan's name lit up the screen. "You free tomorrow? Want to grab dinner?" Kevin stared at the text, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. It was just dinner, right? Friends did that. But the way Ethan had looked at him, the way his hands had lingered, it felt like more. He typed "sure," "sounds good," and hit send before he could overthink it. The next evening, they met at a cozy Italian place in Capitol Hill, the kind of spot with dim lighting and candles flickering on every table. Ethan looked unfairly good in a fitted navy button-down, his sleeves rolled up to show off his forearms. Kevin, in a black sweater and jeans, felt underdressed next to him, but Ethan's easy grin put him at ease. "You clean up nice," Ethan said, his eyes lingering a little too long. Kevin's cheeks warmed, and he busied himself with the menu, trying to ignore the flutter in his chest. Dinner was a blur of pasta, wine, and Ethan's laughter, which always seemed to pull Kevin in like gravity. They talked about work, about the Seahawks' latest game, about the time Ethan had tried to teach Kevin to surf, and they'd both ended up half drowned in the Pacific. But beneath the easy banter, there was a current of something unspoken, something that made Kevin's skin prickle every time their knees brushed under the table. As they walked back to Kevin's apartment, the night air cool against their skin, Ethan's shoulder bumped against his. "You ever feel like you're stuck?" Ethan asked suddenly, his voice quiet. "Like you're waiting for something to happen, but you don't know what." Kevin glanced at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his tone. "Yeah," he admitted. "All the time." Ethan stopped walking, turning to face him. They were on a quiet street, the city's hum a distant backdrop. What if you just went for it?" Ethan's eyes were intense, searching, and Kevin's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, he thought Ethan might lean in, might close the distance between them. But then Ethan stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "Never mind. Forget I said anything." Kevin's heart sank, but he forced a smile. "Yeah, okay. Let's keep walking." The next week was torture. Ethan was everywhere, texting Kevin about random memes, showing up at his desk with coffee, suggesting another gym session. Each interaction was a tightrope walk, Kevin balancing between hope and self-preservation. He wanted to believe Ethan felt something too, but the fear of being wrong kept him silent. At the gym again, Ethan was relentless. He corrected Kevin's form with hands that lingered too long, his fingers brushing Kevin's waist, his thigh, his shoulder. Each touch was a match struck against Kevin's resolve, and he was running out of reasons to pretend it didn't mean anything. "You're killing it today," Ethan said, his voice warm as he spotted Kevin on the bench press. His hands hovered under the barbell, close enough that Kevin could feel their heat. But you gotta stop tensing your shoulders. Relax. Man, easy for you to say, Kevin muttered, pushing the bar up. Ethan's laugh was low, intimate, and Kevin's focus shattered. The bar wobbled, and Ethan's hand shot out, steadying it, his fingers brushing Kevin's chest. Careful, Ethan said, but his eyes weren't on the bar. They were on Kevin, dark and unreadable, and for a moment, Kevin forgot how to breathe. After the workout, they sat on a bench outside the gym, the night air cool against their flushed skin. Ethan was quieter than usual, his usual bravado replaced by something softer, almost hesitant. Kev, he started, then stopped, staring at the ground. You ever feel something you're not supposed to? Kevin's heart stopped. He wanted to ask, to push, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he said, yeah. More than you know. Ethan looked at him then, his eyes searching, and Kevin felt the world tilt. What if Ethan began, his voice barely above a whisper? What if I'm feeling it too? The words hit Kevin like a punch. He stared at Ethan, searching for a sign that this was a joke, a misunderstanding, but all he saw was sincerity. Ethan, he said, his voice rough. What are you saying? Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it, shaking his head. I don't know. Man. I don't know. He stood abruptly, grabbing his gym bag. I gotta go. I'll text you later. Kevin watched him walk away, his heart a storm of confusion and hope. He wanted to chase after him, to demand answers, but fear held him back. Instead, he went home, replaying Ethan's words until they were burned into his mind. The next day, Ethan was distant, his texts short and his smiles forced. Kevin tried to act normal, but the tension between them was a live wire, sparking with every glance. He couldn't take it anymore. He needed to know. That evening, he invited Ethan over, claiming he wanted to watch a new sci-fi flick. Ethan showed up with a six-pack and a nervous energy Kevin hadn't seen before. They sat on Kevin's couch, the movie playing but ignored, the space between them charged with unspoken words. Ethan, Kevin said finally, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. What's going on with you? With us? Ethan froze, his beer halfway to his lips. He set it down, his eyes fixed on the floor. I don't know how to say this, he said, his voice low. I've been feeling things. For you. And it's freaking me out. Kevin's world stopped. He dreamed of this moment, but now that it was here, he didn't know what to do. You're straight, he said, the words sounding hollow even to himself. Ethan laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Yeah, that's what I thought too. But then you came along, and God, Kev, you're all I think about. Kevin's heart was a wildfire, burning through every wall he'd built. Ethan's confession hung in the air, raw and fragile, and Kevin didn't know whether to reach for it or let it slip away. He chose to reach. Ethan, he said, his voice trembling with the weight of years spent hiding. I've been in love with you for a year. Maybe longer. But I never thought you'd feel the same. Ethan's eyes snapped to his, wide with shock and something softer, something like relief. A year, he whispered. Why didn't you say anything? Kevin laughed, a shaky sound. Because you're you. The straight guy who dates models and talks about football. I didn't want to ruin what we had. Ethan moved closer, his knee brushing Kevin's on the couch. "You wouldn't have ruined anything," he said, his voice low and earnest. "You're the best thing in my life. Kev." I just didn't know what to do with it. The air between them crackled, and Kevin felt the pull, the gravity of Ethan's presence drawing him in. He leaned forward, tentative, and Ethan met him halfway. Their lips brushed, soft at first, then desperate, a collision of need and fear and everything they've been holding back. Ethan's hands found Kevin's face, his touch gentle but firm, and Kevin melted into it, his heart a riot of joy and terror. When they pulled apart, breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against Kevin's. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I've never done this before. Not with a guy." Kevin's chest ached with the honesty of it. "Me neither," he said. "Not like this." They spent the rest of the night talking, unraveling the mess of their feelings. Ethan admitted he'd been questioning himself for months, noticing the way his heart raced around Kevin, the way his touches lingered longer than they should. Kevin confessed his own fears, the scars from past rejections, the way he tried to bury his feelings to protect their friendship. But the kiss had changed everything. It was a line they couldn't uncross, and neither of them wanted to. Over the next few days, they fell into a new rhythm, tentative, thrilling, terrifying. They stole moments at the gym, hands brushing in the locker room, glances that said more than words ever could. They went on dates, real ones, to quiet coffee shops and late-night drives along Puget Sound, where the city's lights danced on the water. But it wasn't all easy. Ethan was grappling with his identity, with what it meant to feel this way for a man. He'd grown up in a family where straight was the only option, and though he'd left that behind when he moved to Seattle, the doubts lingered. Kevin, too, carried his own baggage, years of hiding, of being told his love was wrong, of fearing he'd never be enough. One night, after a particularly intense gym session, Ethan pulled Kevin aside in the parking lot. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice tight. "My brother's coming to town next week. He's not like me. He's old school, traditional. I don't know how he'll react if he finds out about us." Kevin's stomach twisted. "Do you want to keep this a secret?" he asked, hating how small his voice sounded. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't want to, but I don't know if I'm ready for that fight." "Not yet," Kevin nodded, swallowing the hurt. He understood, or at least he tried to. But the idea of hiding, of pretending Ethan wasn't his, felt like a step backward. Still, he agreed, because he loved Ethan, and love meant patience, even when it hurt. Ethan's brother, Ryan, arrived like a storm cloud over Seattle's sunny spring. He was a taller, gruffer version of Ethan, with the same blonde hair, but none of his warmth. Kevin met him at a bar where Ethan had insisted they act normal, and the tension was immediate. Ryan's handshake was too firm, his eyes too sharp, like he was sizing Kevin up and finding him lacking. "So, you're Ethan's gym buddy," Ryan said, his tone clipped as he sipped his beer. "He talks about you a lot." Kevin forced a smile, his stomach churning. "Yeah, we've been friends for a while." Ethan was quieter than usual, his usual charisma dimmed under Ryan's presence. The night dragged on, filled with small talk about sports and work. But Kevin could feel Ryan's scrutiny, the way his eyes lingered when Ethan laughed at one of Kevin's jokes or when their shoulders brushed. The breaking point came a few days later. At a family barbecue Ryan had insisted on hosting at Ethan's apartment. Kevin was there, against his better judgment, playing the role of just a friend. But Ethan's touches were careless, his hand on Kevin's knee, his arm around his shoulder, and Ryan noticed. His face darkened, and when Kevin stepped inside to grab a drink, Ryan followed. "What's going on with you and my brother?" Ryan asked, his voice low and dangerous. Kevin's heart pounded. "We're friends," he said, but the lie felt weak, even to him. Ryan stepped closer, his bulk intimidating. "Don't bullshit me. I see the way he looks at you. You're not just friends." Kevin's mouth went dry, but before he could respond, Ethan appeared in the doorway. "Ryan, back off," he said, his voice sharp. Ryan turned, his eyes narrowing. You going to tell me what's going on, Ethan? Or do I have to guess?" The air was thick with tension, and Kevin felt like an intruder in a fight that wasn't his. But Ethan didn't back down. "Yeah, okay," he said, his voice shaking but resolute. "I'm with Kevin. I love him." The words hit Kevin like a tidal wave, washing away the fear, the doubt, the years of hiding. But Ryan's reaction was immediate: anger, disgust, a string of words Kevin had heard too many times before. Ethan stood his ground, his hand finding Kevin's, their fingers interlocking in a quiet act of defiance. Ryan left that night, vowing to fix Ethan, to make him see reason. But Ethan didn't waver. He pulled Kevin close, his voice fierce. "I'm done hiding," he said. "I choose you." The fallout with Ryan was brutal, but was also freeing. Ethan cut contact with his brother, choosing Kevin over a family that couldn't accept him. It wasn't easy. Kevin saw the pain in Ethan's eyes, the weight of losing someone he'd once looked up to. But they faced it together, building something stronger in the ruins. They moved forward, no longer hiding. At the gym, they didn't shy away from touches or glances, and though some regulars raised eyebrows, most didn't care. Seattle was their haven, a city where love didn't have to justify itself. They went on dates openly, holding hands in Capitol Hill, kissing under the cherry blossoms in spring. Each moment was a victory, a step toward a life Kevin had never dared dream of. But the real test came months later, when Ethan got a job offer in San Francisco. It was a dream opportunity, one he couldn't turn down. He asked Kevin to come with him, to start over together. Kevin hesitated, his old fears creeping in, fear of change, of losing himself in someone else. But then he looked at Ethan, at the man who'd chosen him against all odds, and he knew. They moved to San Francisco, finding a small apartment with a view of the bay. The gym became their ritual again, a place where touches were no longer questions but promises. Kevin learned to let go of his past, to trust that love could be enough. Ethan learned to embrace who he was, not just for Kevin, but for himself. One evening, as they stood on their balcony, the city's lights stretching out before them, Ethan took Kevin's hand. "You set me on fire. You know that," he said, his voice soft but sure. "Every day, you make me want to be better." Kevin smiled, his heart full. "You did that for me first." Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, a testament to the courage it takes to love, to risk, to choose each other against the world. And as they stood there, hand in hand, Kevin knew they'd keep choosing each other, no matter what came next.